Yeah, thanks a lot, Dave, and thanks everybody for sticking around for the last presentation today. I don't know about you, but every time I hear Pat Patterson speak, I don't know if it's his English accent or whatever, but I feel a little bit smarter after I've listened to him. Might be the English accent, but I usually feel smarter after listening to Pat. They did a great job, and hopefully you'll see some of the same or some themes that are similar between what they're doing and what we're doing. We have a slightly different take on SCIM, and hopefully through the story I'm about to tell you, you'll see where we're taking things and some of the unique challenges that we have at Cisco. So I'll dive straight in and we can talk a little bit about our journey in the evolution of the identity as a service. So this is my WebEx site. So part of the group that I work in is the collaboration group at Cisco. So there are 3 groups from Cisco here at the Cloud Identity Summit. There's the IT group, which is part of Ron John Rain, Jane and his team here, Dave Jones and several others. And then there's the ICE group, which handles some of the network access control stuff that we do. But I'm part of the collaboration group, and that's what I looked like 3 years ago when I joined Cisco. And as you can see, from what I've done in the identity space, I've kind of evolved. And it's been an evolution because of the types of things that we're trying to do at Cisco in the identity as a service space with collaboration. And hopefully you'll see a little bit about what we've learned along the way. Now, one of the reasons why we've had to evolve is because at Cisco, we have a number of products that we deliver today via the cloud. WebEx is one of our leading products in the industry. Jabber, which is a instant messaging client that is deployed primarily on-prem, but also is delivered through the cloud via Messenger. And then we have a huge infrastructure of phone, IP phone, telepresence, video conferencing units that some of you probably use today on a daily basis, or your executives use on a daily basis inside their environments and how they do their job. We like to talk about it being from the pocket to the boardroom. We're helping companies collaborate. Now, that's caused us, especially in today's world, with all that we are doing as a industry and global world in moving to the cloud, to evolve. Okay? We have a huge legacy business that is on-prem. How do we make that solution live in a cloud-based world? So before I get into all the evolution, I'll get my perfunctory evolutionary joke out of the way, which is that in evolution, okay, you know where you start, you know where you end, but the stuff in the middle is somewhat a little bit squishy. Okay, and that's kind of been the way that Cisco's journey has been. We knew where we were, we know what we do, we know where we want to be, but how are we going to get there? What is it going to look like? Okay, and I'll tell you a little bit honestly, when we started this journey, we thought we knew where we wanted to be, and it's changed. In the 2.5 years that we've been working on this, it's changed significantly. Luckily enough, we did some things along the way that allowed us to evolve smartly. Okay. Now, when we started the journey, we had 3 basic concepts that we were trying to achieve. One was to simplify and standardize the user experience for our customers. Whether they were using things on-prem or in the cloud, we wanted it to be simple to use and a standard in its approach. We also wanted to accelerate the development lifecycle inside Cisco. Okay? We're a traditional company. Software is not all of what we do, okay? We do a lot of hardware, okay? And so that software agile development cycle was a really important shift in our culture and in what we were trying to empower developers to be able to do. At the same time, as you guys know, if you haven't been under a stone for the last year, that security and compliance is the #1 topic that is being discussed, not only inside enterprises, but across every single cloud and government agency in the world, right? So how do you do all of those 3 things in an identity as a service, okay? So those are the things that were guiding us. Now, when I first started, okay, this is the picture that we drew around our portfolio, okay, when it came to identity and standards. We have over 16 different products that we deploy for customers potentially on-prem. And when I first joined, none of them spoke SAML, okay? None of them, right? And the reason why was because a lot of them were hardware-based, a lot of them had their own notion of directory and linked into the existing LDAP solutions that most companies had deployed. Why do they need to worry about SAML? Why do they need to think about cross-domain federation? So over the last 2.5 years, we've invested in that portfolio and upgraded all of the on-prem products so they could speak two protocols, not just SAML, but OAuth, okay, so that they could not only authenticate, but then use that authentication and authorization token across lots of those different component products. Not just from an identity authentication perspective, but how the services authorize themselves into the overall application. Okay, so not just user authentication and authorization, but machine account, systems, services, et cetera. Now this is critical because it laid the foundation for some of the things that we're trying to do. But again, back to that original goal, when we first started, simplify, okay, and make it the user experience standard. We also had, in our early vision, a simple goal. How do we make the login experience simple and trustworthy for our customers? This is just an example of what the login experience looked like for WebEx, okay? You can see that regardless of what device you logged in on, okay, you had a number of different experiences you might be confronted with. Do I put in my email address? Do I put in my username? Is this really from Cisco, from WebEx? So there were lots of different things we had to overcome early on. And that was the original challenge. So we're starting to replace that with one login, one experience, so that users can trust and see what they're supposed to do and know what they're supposed to do. Early on, one of the challenges that we faced was, hey, do we control the global namespace? Do we try to create one user identity for all of the products that we own inside Cisco? Now that could be up to 50 million different identities that go through our products in different forms. Do we try that? And we in our original vision are doing that because one of the things that we're trying to do is improve that experience. So when a user comes to our app by email, we can look up what type of authentication mechanism their organization has created and route them to the right place. So if it's single sign-on, we can put them in the SAML authentication or IDP that they've chosen to configure for their products. So when we built our original engine, our original identity as a service engine, this is what it looked like, okay? We tried to build a connector to the on-prem environment to do provisioning of Active Directory up to the cloud, okay? We also built an authorization engine and an OAuth endpoint that allowed us to issue OAuth tokens for not only users in their clients, but also the systems and services that we're authenticating into our cloud. Okay, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. We also used a world-class identity store, one that allowed us to shard data not only on geolocation, so whether you're in Europe or the United States, routing you to the right location to make sure that we could handle some of the safe harbor requirements that our European customers require, but also allowing us to stand up the first active service inside the Cisco cloud. Okay, so that regardless of what's happening in a very demanding environment, we can make sure that authentication is a first-class service that is always up, and we can, more importantly in today's world, deploy without bringing the service down. Okay, deploy all the time, more often, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But the most important thing I'll point to is on that right-hand side. When we first started our identity as a service, that right-hand side, which is our services, the things that power the experience for our customers, okay, weren't our primary objective. Okay, we built service accounts and machine accounts for them to authenticate into our identity as a service, but they were part of our security story. They were part of our hey, we need to be soup to nuts able to serve whoever was coming into our environment, okay? We were more concerned with the left-hand side, which was the user, okay? But as you'll see in this evolutionary journey, okay, that right-hand side became more and more important. So what we also brought into the picture originally is that, and I realize now that I jumped past an earlier slide that was a lot more fun, is that our partners are a really important part of our ecosystem at Cisco, okay? Not only the partners that power our platform like ForgeRock and OpenAM and Unbound ID, okay, but also the partners that extend our solution to our customers. So we do not believe that we're in the business of bridging the identity as a service in the cloud or for the on-prem world for companies that have traditional IDPs already in place, like we saw earlier with Ping Federate and Salesforce. Customers buy their own IDPs and support their own IDPs. We believe we're like the United Nations. We have to support whatever the customer has deployed. Now, when they don't have anything, we have some simple tools that allow them to exist. But more importantly for us, it's about using our partner network to bring the user into the environment as they have chosen that meet their compliance requirements. So Ping, Okta, Salesforce are critical vendors of ours. OpenAM and ForgeRock do a lot to help us bring identities into our solution securely. So you guys heard Pat talk about SCIM, okay? And you heard me talk about that right-hand side and the product that we are supporting as a platform. The developer and SCIM have been one of the most critical things about what we made early decisions on in our identity as a service. And the reason why they were so critical is that they are powering our developers inside Cisco to build the apps that they're generating today. So when we talk about Spark, okay, which I'll show you a screen example in a minute, they've built all of the create user, update user, delete user, even the organizational management, okay? What a lot of people don't talk about in SCIM is the SCIM side of that. How do you update the organization? How do you manage the tenant, okay? All of that inside the platform is being managed via those APIs. So the question that the gentleman asked earlier in Pat's presentation about, is SCIM good enough to power the developer? We're doing it today. And that's where users are being looked up. That's where creations are happening, okay? All against the platform using the standard protocol. And why is that powerful, right? It means that the developer is given the API that they need, right? The RESTful interface to allow them to be creative, okay? And it's a standard. So if there is a change, okay, that same standard, the underlying platform doesn't have to change with it, right? The schema can be extended, as Pat showed you earlier, right? That's the power, okay? And as you are either a service provider inside your enterprise, okay, or a service provider in the cloud, if you're not being asked by developers inside your enterprise to make your service, your identities of your employees more available for their development efforts beyond the LDAP standard, then you are going to get asked that question very shortly, because that's what they're expecting. That's what the developers inside your organization are expecting. That's what happened to us, right? And it was only because we had SCIM available that we were able to respond. So this is an example as well of the app that I just talked about, right? So, look past the application. It's like, if for some of you who may not be familiar with Spark, it's like Slack for business, okay? There's a lot of business security that's built into it, but more importantly, what I'm trying to show you here is two things. One is this is the example of what we were able to stand up within 6 months because we had those APIs and the identity infrastructure in place for them to not only authenticate the services, but do the API calls to manage the users and interface with the users inside our repository. So for free, they got, well, relatively for free, the developers got access to over 2.5–3 million identities that were already in the platform. Now, the other thing I want to show you, and the reason why I put this picture up here, is the other critical thing that we did as a part of our identity as a service was build from the ground up day one using a DevOps model, right? So the other aspect of things is if you're not being asked for API-driven access to your platform, wherever it is in the identity perspective, you should be looking at your development lifecycle and asking yourself, can I respond fast? Okay? I think all of us at least once throughout the last year have been asked by our executive management, hey, can you do this update because of the security, vulnerability, or whatever within 24 hours? And how many of you can honestly say, yeah, I've got an easy process and I just did a 24-hour build last week? So no problem. And I'm sure there are people in this room who can answer that question. But the life cycle of our development process is accelerating. And it's even more important for the identity aspects to keep pace with that. Because we hold the keys to the kingdom, the keys to the users that our developers need access to. And if we can't respond quickly and easily to those security events, or more importantly to the feature requests that those developers will request along with your access, okay, and the APIs, that is what drives the modern business today. That's where identity becomes not just a cost and security center, but part of a profit center, part of a service that accelerates the business. And that's why identity as a service in the modern world and what we would call the world that it is today is API-driven, DevOps-driven. Now this is an example of our build squad, a room that we create with a bunch of developers that are responsible in our DevOps team for making sure the latest build succeeds. We do all kinds of automated tests that we, in our portfolio, probably about 65, 70% of our identity platform is automated test-driven. But even when you bring all of the different services that I showed you on that left-hand side, okay, into the mix that are doing the same, you will find that times the automated tests may all succeed, but there's a test case that didn't get created, okay, that's causing the thing to break, right? This is an example of in a room very quickly where those developers see the errors, see the dashboard, respond, troubleshoot, fix, deploy. Right now inside the Cisco Identity as a Service, we're deploying on average, okay, about once a week, okay? We do and have done cycles where we're deploying every day for 3 or 4 days in a row. If there's a significant security or something that we need to respond to from a feature request that requires our identity as a platform to move forward. But that's the world that we live in, okay? Now everybody's different, but I would argue that because of the landscape and the foundation of the world that we live in today and the security things that we're seeing in the market, that if you're not being asked to do and respond that quickly now, you will be soon, okay? So what are you doing? What are you putting in place operationally? The tools, the culture, okay, the experimentation, okay, to be able to meet those needs, because it took us 3 years to perfect the operational methods to make this happen, to put the tools, the monitoring, the culture in place, okay? The guys that are responding like developers, like operations experts. So something to think about. So where else is identity as a service evolving, okay? One of the other things that I don't think is unique to Cisco, but is a challenge for us, specifically in the identity as a service world, is we have to live not only in the cloud, but we also have to live in an on-prem world as well. Okay, I showed you the picture earlier where 16 different solutions of ours can live in an on-prem environment, and that is their primary deployment environment. What people don't know is below that is a VM infrastructure that is powering that inside our appliance. Okay, so in a sense, we're running a mini cloud, a hybrid cloud already in most of the customers' deployments. Now, why is that critical? Okay, is because the identity data that powers that on-prem environment or the cloud environment, okay, can live in 3 different topologies, okay? It could live where it is solely on-prem. It could live in a world where it is solely in the cloud. It could also live in a world where it is a hybrid. Okay, we have customers today that ask us, hey, we would like to be in both cloud and on-prem inside the United States, but for Europe, we're going to be completely separate and isolated. Okay, that's the way they want to run their organization, right? So we have to come up with a topology that allows our identity data to live close to that customer in those applications, okay, but also allows us to work across those different deployment options. So that's not just today, right? The world that we live in also requires us to integrate with clouds that might exist in other locations. So we do and have standards that allow us to interface with Salesforce. We do that today. We do it all the time. We do it with Microsoft Azure. Okay? We also do it in private hybrid clouds with customers that are large telcos. Okay? But more and more, I think we all will face the environments where we are being asked by our customers to live in one or many of those different clouds and make sure that our services, as well as our users, okay, can not only authenticate, but also authorize the services that we need to be successful. And we need to be able to do that in a way that meets the modern security compliance rules that our customers are looking for, right? So that's the evolution that we're going through right now. How do we, okay, use what we have, okay, to do this? And right now, in our current deployment, we have our services in one cloud, our identity in another cloud, okay, and some of our other services in a different cloud, and we will also authenticate to a Salesforce or other services in different clouds for things like our support ticketing, okay, and things like that. So we're bridging identities across multiple clouds today. This is something that I think all of us will be challenged with in the next 2 to 3 years as we evolve. So when we look back and we look at the evolutionary side of what identity as a service is, this was the fun slide I think I skipped over earlier, but realistically, we started probably with Kerberos as the first incantation of a service that allowed us to bridge identity across lots of different things. But it never could reach outside the cloud. So we came up with better standards, okay, SPIML, DISML, okay, the early iterations of what we call today SCIM, okay? But they had to start somewhere. Federation took us a long way. OAuth took us a long way, okay? But there were things that needed to be improved. Could it handle the security needed for machine accounts, for service accounts? And what I would argue is if lots of guys in this room are been around long enough and saw the early incantations of identity as a service in TriCipher, ArcSight, okay, even simplified in some of their early deployments, okay? And then all of the applications that those identity as a service vendors have added to make the value and stickiness of the platform powerful for the SMB. But we've also seen that that's not enough, right? We need the IoT, the ability to add multiple devices and manage those devices for the vendors. But most importantly, what I'd argue is that SCIM is probably the most important thing that we are delivering out of Identity as a Service 2.0 because it is setting the stage for what I would argue is Identity as a Service 4.0 and what it may become. Because the developers, okay, that live inside our organizations, that want to create the applications for the consumers and our employees, they need access to the key, to the most important asset, the identity. And so we can be a service to them by empowering them with those RESTful APIs. So if you're not being asked for it now, I would argue you're going to get it quickly. So that's my take on identity as a service and the evolutionary steps, what we're doing at Cisco. I'll stop there and let you guys ask any questions if you have any.
Any questions?
Thought-provoking?
Is it moving in the right direction for IDaaS for what you guys would expect? No controversy there?
None?
You don't want to beat Nick up?